Thanks for having us today. And our topic is, sorry. Yeah. So our topic is compliance of Gacha probability disclosure regulations in the East Asia context. And the presenter today is me, Kuma, also the co-author for Bill yesterday, and I'm responsible for the Japanese part, and Yuchen, who is responsible for the Taiwan part, and also thanks for the support for data collection and data analysis for Cassie and Sunny. Thank you. And so let's start the presentation today. And originally, we will start by defining the gacha and loot box. However, thanks for the previous presentations, I guess most of us will clearly know the definition for gacha and loot box. However, I need to mention that in our presentation, gacha and loot box actually got the same meaning, and they are just the randomized items with uncertain value and which could be purchased by real world money or in-game currency. And so originally there would be a game part, but it's too childish, so just skip it. So the one of the screenshot is from FGO, and the other is from Pokemon TGC. And I guess most of us will know that that is the most common type of loot boxes or gacha in the video games. However, how about that? It is the battle rewards we can get from the video games, and the players need to consume stamina, which could be purchased by in-game currency or real world money. In this study, yes, it is loot box because of the feature of randomization, and the players can purchase it by in-game currency and real world money. And so now we know that actually the presence of loot box in video games is much more prevalent than we might thought. And then comes what is important to conduct research on it. We may have heard a lot about it according to the previous presentation. And yes, at present, it is hard to find mobile games without loot box, and we can always find the concerns about the links between loot box and gambling disorders, and the gaming disorders and gambling, and also the emotional value of getting favorite characters from the gacha. So it seems that better regulate gacha seems very, very extremely important. And at present in East Asia, mainland China, Taiwan, and South Korea have all released laws to regulate loot boxes in video games, especially require the in-game disclosure. Only Japan still relies on industrial self-regulation for the probability disclosure of loot boxes after the government banned Gacha in 2020 because it breaks a pre-existing consumer law. And for this study, we built on previous studies that examined the enforcement of gaming regulations in mainland China and South Korea, mainly to investigate how comparable regulations are implemented in Taiwan and Japan, which is two very important gaming markets, but the regulatory practices remain unclear. While it's mainly focuses on the regulations in Taiwan and Japan, so here comes the specific explanation of the regulations. And so first, for Taiwan, companies are required to disclose the probability of each potential rewards, which means the categorized probability disclosure is illegal, just like the screenshot showed. Also, the probability must be shown in percentage. Descriptions like very high or very low chance are not allowed. Finally, which is also the most special requirement, and it is also one of our focus of this study, is companies are required to display a warning message of this is a chance-based product. The consumer is not guaranteed to obtain any specific product by virtual or purchasing or participating or similar sentence to the players. And then in Japan, there's a very special type of loot box, which is Gacha, which was banned by the government in 2012. And the kompu means complete. In these systems, players are required to collect a specific type of items, like shown in the picture, to collect A, B, and C to get extremely rare item, whatever item E. So it's very similar to collect the 7 Dragon Balls in that anime. And after the government banned the Gacha, some overseas game companies also began to cut down their Gacha-like mechanics in the Japanese version. For example, in 2016, Call of Duty removed its bonus calling card systems, which requires players to collect all 7 of the calling cards in black market. And following the ban on Gacha, many non-official organizations in Japan began to drafting self-regulation guidelines to improve the environment for the video game market in Japan. Notably, their measurements mainly require their member companies to disclose the probability for all loot boxes. And internationally, in 2017, Apple began requiring games on Apple Store to disclose the presence of loot box. And in 2019, Google also took the same measures. And we can see that probability disclosure has become the main approach to improving transparency. And in our study, we especially examine the probability disclosure and use it as our main standards for compliance. And then Yuchen will...
Okay. Thanks, Tuma. So for the methods, we basically download the 100 high-grossing iPhone games in Japan and Taiwan, and 200 games from the total sample, and we collect information from the games app store. We play each game for 1 hour and use our best endeavors to try to find as many loot boxes as possible. And we're recording our gameplay for the 1 hour gameplay and screenshotting all loot boxes found. And we also documented information on specific requirements in Taiwan and Japan, particularly focusing on the formatting of probability disclosure in Taiwan and the warning message in Taiwan, as well as the Gacha regulations related information in Japan. And we assess the prevalence of loot box and probability disclosures, as well as the game's compliance with specific requirements. Particularly, we introduced the partial disclosure rates that examine games that disclose probabilities of at least 1 loot box, as well as the compliance rates that measures games that disclose probabilities of all loot boxes found. And only compliance rate reflects companies' compliance with regulations. And we also compare the results in other East Asia regions and beyond. So, results and discussion. For the loot box prevalence, this table shows that of the 100 high-grossing games, 91 in Japan and 93 in Taiwan contain loot boxes. And compared with other regions, we can see that loot box prevalence in East Asia are similarly high across four East Asian regions. And they're all around 90%. While European countries have a relatively lower prevalence of loot boxes, as shown in the UK and the Netherlands. But anyway, it means most mobile games that generate huge revenue widely use loot boxes, particularly in East Asia. And going further, this table shows the distribution of games containing loot boxes in each Apple's age rating categories in Japan and Taiwan. Loot box prevalence is over 80% in all age categories except 4+, and over 90% of games in age categories 13 and above contain loot boxes. No matter how we consider the suitable age gating for children to play games with loot boxes, children and adults are both widely exposed to loot boxes and, of course, at risk of financial and mental loss. And another interesting question is why? Why the number of games and loot box prevalence are lower in the 4+ age categories in Apple's rating system? This is because Apple changed its age rating system policy last year. It required companies to self-disclose the presence of loot boxes on their App Store pages by the end of 31st January 2026, and Apple would raise its game to at least 9+ if they did so. So we collect Apple age ratings So we collected Apple age ratings of all of these sample games across different regions before and after the deadline, as shown in the two tables, to assess whether companies comply with the new policies. And as a result, we can see a drop in the number of games aged 4 in the 4 regions. Although few games still fail to self-disclose that they contain loot boxes based on our coding, and thus they have incorrect ratings, most games comply with the new policy and provide correct and transparent information to parents, guardians, and children. And it's also a signal from a powerful platform to show that, okay, games with loot boxes are not really suitable for really young children. And regarding the probability disclosures, this table compares the partial disclosure rate and the compliance rate across 4 regions. Japan and Taiwan have similarly high partial disclosure rate of around 90%, while mainland China has the highest rate across 4 regions, nearly reaching 97%. This data shows that most games disclose probabilities of at least 1 loot box. However, the compliance rate in Japan, Taiwan, and mainland China are significantly lower than their partial disclosure rate. The huge gap shows that most games only disclose probabilities for maybe most prominent and most obvious loot boxes, like the Farina banners showing here, while other more obscure and hidden randomized mechanics, such as those requiring players to spend resin energy gaining randomized rewards, like the artifact domain in Genshin in the second picture, do not have any probability disclosures. And regarding more specific requirements in Taiwan, only 93 of 23 games disclose probability as a percentage for each individual possible rewards in every loot box found. And again, this number is significantly lower than the partial disclosure rate. Most games did not comply with the specific requirements. And interestingly, some games disclose probabilities along with tags, reading that, okay, all items in the same rarity category share probabilities evenly, but did not tell players exactly how many items are sharing it. For example, as shown here, it's hard for players to know the chance to get Farina or any other character just in 1 second because it didn't show up. And these games did not disclose probabilities of individual items because they require players to count the total number of items and make calculations, which would be impossible and unrealistic if a loot box have hundreds of items in one single category. It's company's obligation and responsibility to disclose the probabilities of each possible item to improve the transparency, rather than just placing a single line of text here. And companies' compliance with the warning regulations extremely poor. Most games did not comply with the warning regulations, even though 21 of them state that they would comply in their terms and conditions. For example, here, this game's term promised to display warning message following the Article 12 information the scan shows specify. However, we did not see any warning messages in any randomized mechanics in the game. It proved that these games were aware of the warning regulations. However, they not only failed to comply, but also breached the contract between the company and players, which is definitely even worse.
Time limit. Okay, as for the Japan, we find 4 games that suspect to contain Gacha mechanics in our sample, and we identified them by investigating that if they offer the players a prize in charge for the collecting at least 2 different in-game items in a very specific combinations. And For the Gacha cases, we find they use different strategies to avoid being directly identified as Gacha. For example, they use exchange to replace collect or provide rewards that are not very real. However, they share the feature of card matching, which where rewards are obtained by collecting specific items. And as the example shows here, the secret mission from the Pokemon TCG, players can only find this mission if they collect all of those required items. However, most players are able to get the information just from the player community. And then comes the conclusion. I will only mention the limitation for our studies. That is the 1 hour gameplay really limit our research. That is, for most of the Gacha mechanics, players are required even longer play time to unlock those mechanics. And thanks for your listening. Any questions?
Hi, thank you for your very interesting project. I'm sorry I missed a couple of minutes at the beginning of your presentation, so I apologize if this has already been explained. But I want to know why did you choose East Asia, this specific geographical range, as the object of this study? Why do you think that these countries should be studied together, and why is it meaningful to compare them? And can these, like, maybe if there's any like regularity, can it be applied to maybe other countries, territories in this area too? Thank you.
Well, okay. So one of the first reason we choose East Asian as our sample is following this conference thing. It's a gacha thing, and gacha is really popular in East Asia, and particularly in China and Japan. And Genshin, of course, is one of the most popular gacha games recently, and so we also use a lot of samples and examples to prove that they also contain lots of loot boxes. And regarding why we compare the compliance in different regions, that's because we want to show that loot box prevalence and the poor compliance with probability disclosures is not unique in just one or two, several individual regions, but it's a really widespread phenomenon across different regions, and not just in East Asia, but also in some European countries like what we've shown here in the UK and the Netherlands, and maybe Belgium and more countries in Western Europe, that they also have lots of games with loot boxes, and they are really prevalent, and they can be easily accessed to children nearly across all age categories. Yes.
And the East Asia is both the main game developer and the game market in this world, and especially for Japan, before the gacha game become popular in other places, inside Japan it have been like extremely popular, and also they got collections between the law regulated, as almost four of these 4 places are all regulated to some extent to their loot boxes. And I think also it is because the similarity for the cultural and the player community, so we choose the specific context.
Yeah, and another reason is most East Asia regions have law to regulate these loot boxes, but other countries like the UK still use industry self-regulations, so they have different compliance, and we need to be noticed at it.
Time is limited. did.
Thank you. And I have a question that you have. There's an interesting way of explaining the loot box of Genshin or MiHoYo. It's called in Chinese 米池, or let me explain it in English. Well, MiHoYo style loot box. Yes. How do you think of this phenomenon? Because as you know, you have play a lot of games, hundreds of them, and how do you
Which means
very interesting
you not
about
only
it.
need to collect the character, but the weapon for the character?
No, it's just it's kind of, I think I'm not sure how to explain it. It's a kind of game style, or to design whether how long the time the player can gather enough bonus or coins and to get to ensure they can get one character or some other stuffs. Yeah.
I guess if I understand correctly, your question might be more related to the grinding process and the whole video game resource loop stuff. So I don't really think it's quite related to our research as shown here. But yeah, MiHoYo's banner really famous. And yeah, how should I say that? Most games in our list use the loot boxes, but MiHoYo's banners is not the only one format. They're just one of very different formats, and yes, they are all in our they're all in our samples, and as long as it's a loot box, players need to pay and to get randomized rewards. They are in our calculations, so it's not really about whether it is MiHoYo's banner or not. Yes.
Yeah, I do have a question here, but I'm okay. I'm looking at the chair of the time, if it's okay with time. Okay, thank you so much. I was wondering about the pity system, right? So we've been talking about this, Leon and I have been talking about this before, that more and more games are using that pity system. So I want to hear your thoughts about, to what extent do you think that disclosing or like showing the disclosure probability disclosures, to what extent will that still help regulate these games when developers might get around it through something like a pity system? This is a difficult question, I know.
I know. So I have to say, pity timer guaranteed players can get the rewards they want after a certain number of pulls, maybe 90s, maybe 180, maybe 300s. And before players reach that certain number, they have no guarantee to get a reward. So pity system is not take effective before reaching that specific point. So the probability disclosure is of course really effective during the whole time. And even if a banner has PD timer mechanics, players still need to know their chance to get one single certain character or certain items, no matter if there's PD timer or not. And as we can see that, maybe not showing the picture here, but MiHoYo published probability disclosure of getting maybe the Farina after they calculate the PD timer. So it'll be a little bit higher than the disclosure they get before the PD timer is triggered. So it's a little bit misleading, to be honest, because yes, before you trigger the PD timers, the probability showing in the page is technically incorrect. Yeah.
And one very specific personal experience of me for playing Ultimate games, like it's a very special example as for the banner in Ultimate games. If you are not get the appropriate or targeted card from the male character, then the card, even it is 5 stars, is useless. So at that time, the PT timer doesn't work. Yes.
Thank you.
I just want to add that the pity system actually have a disclosure process, because you can see that, for example, there is a banner told you that you will get what you want after 70 draws. Then after 60 draws, they say every time you draw 1 card, the probability will increase 2-folds than the previous one. So this is a kind of a new strategy that players would just take the first 60, and then from 60 to 70, they draw 1 by 1. It's not the 10 as a whole, but 1 by 1, because you will easily get it at the 2nd, 3rd, 4th. But there is a disclosure.
Thanks very much, everyone.